Well, today in class we started talking about the question, what is money? And I provided a handout. Hopefully you've got a copy because I'll be referring to it in the course of this presentation. If you don't, please go to Nexus and grab it off there. Also on Nexus, there's a link to the Money is Debt 1 video that I'd like you to watch for next Wednesday's class prior to our coffee talk discussion. Well, in class today we pointed to the notion that money is a conventional medium of exchange that represents a social debt-credit relationship. Money facilitated exchange and eliminated the double coincidence of wants problem, which was one limitation of straight barter. I mean, you may want my chickens, but maybe I don't want your goats that you're offering. But provided that our tribe agreed that eagle feathers were money, this universal intermediary of exchange, or that the leaders decreed that they were money, well, I could give you my chickens, and instead of taking your goats, I could be paid in eagle feathers. And I could exchange those eagle feathers with another person who had a bag of beans that I want, so I could get what I want. We also pointed out today that there's an underlying biological meaning to this debt-credit social relationship that derives from Darwin's notion of social community or group selection. Given the fact that we're finite organisms who gain a survival advantage from being members of cooperative groups. When we're a member of a cooperative group, we can call in others to help us ward off predators or to give us resources in times of want. Whereas individuals who are trying to go it alone and survive on their own, well, they can't. Cooperative groups tally up credits and debts amongst members, and justice demands it. Otherwise, some members are going to take the provisions of others, survive and reproduce their genes at the expense of the others, which is simply not fair to the others. Also today in class I talked a little bit about tally sticks, which were a traditional way in which human beings and tribes accounted for the debts that they owed to others and the credits that they had with others in the struggle for existence. While anything could be used as money, last today I talked briefly about the 6 criteria of practical sound money that are attributed to Aristotle from his books The Politics and the Nicomachean Ethics. These 6 criteria are portability, intrinsic worth, fungibility, divisibility, durability, and being a store of value over time. Portability just means that the medium of exchange must be easily portable on the human person. It's not easy to carry a barrel of oil on your back. It's not easily portable, whereas it's easily, a silver coin can fit in one's pocket, and it's easily portable, and you can take it wherever you're going and exchange it with whomever you like. Intrinsic worth means that the medium of exchange has a worth or usefulness beyond its function as money. For example, silver is used in solar panels and cell phones. Whereas, dollar bills, really they have no usefulness, perhaps save fire starting tinder, besides their function as money. So paper money does not match up with this one criterion that Aristotle gave us. The next one, fungibility, F-U-N-G-I-B-I-L-I-T-Y, means that each unit of the medium of exchange must substitute for one another. For example, a $2007 bill is worth just as much as a $2013 bill, where it's tough to substitute an eagle feather for another because not all are the same, not all are the same size. Perhaps one's more beautiful than the other, the feathers are arranged more beautifully. Or if we were to use shiny rocks as money, well, one rock might be a little bit more shiny than another, or a little bit bigger than another, and so there's no way that we could say that one is just simply equal to the other. They're not substitutable for one another in terms of their worth. The next one is divisibility, and this just means that the medium of exchange must divide up in a way that helps with the measuring of the worth of other things, like houses, cars, sheep, cattle, or a bushel of wheat. For example, dollars are equivalent to 4 quarters. You can exchange 4 quarters for $1. You can exchange $1 for 10 dimes, or you can exchange those 10 dimes for $1. Those things are 10 dimes and $1 are worth the exact same. The next one is durability, and silver is a metal that it takes to be heated up to almost 1,000 degrees in order to turn into liquid form. So basically, in whatever form it's in, it's sure to last over time. So that's an example of durability. The last one is being a store of value over time. And just to give you an example, an apple or an orange goes soft and brown, losing its nutritional value. You wouldn't want to eat an apple that's just completely black or moldy, whereas gold has been used as money for 5,000 years across many cultures. It doesn't tarnish that easily, and its price in dollars is generally listed on most TV newscasts today. So it's a store of value over time. It would seem that gold and silver and other precious metals like platinum and palladium match all 6 of these criteria that Aristotle allegedly gives us. But eagle feathers, oil, Bitcoin, a bushel of wheat, and paper money simply don't. It's for this reason that many figures like economists and especially precious metals salespeople have suggested that Aristotle believed that only gold and silver were authentically money. I wouldn't go that far. Aristotle's text is certainly suggestive of this claim, but really there's no smoking gun for it. And this is just really presumption. There might be some better reasons for attributing this idea to Aristotle, but certainly, there's just not a single quote that just says gold and silver are the only, form of legitimate money. Here in my hand here, I have a 1 ounce silver bullion, 99.9% silver maple leaf coin, which is officially worth $5. It says $5 on the back here, 5 Canadian dollars. That's what the mint has stamped it as. But the metal of this coin itself is 1 troy ounce of silver is worth about $22 in paper money. I also have here a set of 1966 Canadian coins. You can see there's a silver dollar there. There's a half dollar, and a quarter, and a dime. Those are all silver, 80% silver. So yes, prior to 1968, Canada did have silver, a precious metal, in our coins way back when. Whereas today our coins are made generally of cheap steel and copper nickel and all sorts of plating and all sorts of composite metals. A second important point that Aristotle makes about money is that when we're using money, we shouldn't forget about the underlying tangible goods and services that we're trading. Wealth is about our ownership of tangible goods and services for Aristotle, not simply the accumulation of the medium of exchange. And in the Politics, Aristotle makes the case that a good, virtuous life is inconsistent with the mere pursuit of wealth-getting of the artificial or synthetic sort that's possible with the use of money. We shouldn't just accumulate money to the maximal degree in a manner that's totally decoupled from life and from the necessities of the household. We should be concerned for generating or accumulating tangible and useful goods, services, items, and resources. That's what we should focus on. The medium of exchange is just a substitute or a stand-in. When he talks about the household, you should know that the Greek word oikos is the root word for two English words, economy and ecology. Aristotle in the Politics states that riches are assumed by many to be only about the quantity of coin accumulated, because the arts of getting wealth and retail trade are concerned with coin, whereas others maintain that coin money is a mere sham, a thing not natural but conventional only, because if the users substitute another commodity for it, it is worthless, and because it is not useful as a means to any of the necessities of life. And indeed, he who is rich in coin may often be in want of necessary food. But how can that be? Wealth of a man may have a great abundance and yet perish with hunger, like Midas in the fable, whose insatiable prayer turned everything that was set before him into gold. So Midas had prayed for everything around him to be turned into gold, but little did he realize that, there was nothing to eat. So people can, I guess the message is that people can pursue money all they want, but you just have to remember that that's a medium of exchange. It's not actual wealth. Actual wealth is only in the form of tangible, useful goods. This is all kind of like the Cree proverb, when the last tree is cut down, the last fish eaten, and the last stream poisoned, you will realize that you cannot eat money. Aristotle goes on to suggest that there are two sorts of wealth getting, as I have said. One is a part of household management, the other is retail trade. The former necessary and honorable, while that which consists in exchange is unnatural. The most hated sort is usury, which makes a gain out of money itself and not from the natural object of it. For money was intended to be used in exchange, but not to increase at interest. And this term interest, which means the birth of money from money, of all modes of wealth, getting this is the most unnatural. So he's making the case that, just simply focusing on the money, the medium of exchange, rather than the tangible goods, that's something that's unnatural. There's a contemporary philosopher by the name of John McMurtry. He was at the University of Guelph. I think he's retired now. He was a political philosopher who wrote a book called Unequal Freedoms: The Global Market as an Ethical System. And there's one of, the introduction to this book is contained in your course pack right at the end. And in it, he postulates that there's a difference between what he calls the life code of value and the money code of value. And just to give you a sense for what he's saying, which is, quite consistent with what Aristotle is saying, McMurtry suggests that we need to recognize that money is a socially constructed unit of demand on society's labor, resources, and goods. And he thinks that we need to redirect the way that money is used such that it's truly being used in service to life, rather than being used to place an ever-increasing demand on life by way of its use. In the book, Unequal Freedoms, he thinks that money can be used as a way to enhance life, that money can be used to acquire the means of life, for example, food, water, healthcare, education, and in so doing, a person enhances their life range and capacities. A person experiences a more comprehensive range of thought, feeling, and action. But he thinks that today, this kind of thing is being contaminated by the money code of value, where money is just being used to make more money, which is being used to make even more money, which is being used to make even more money, in an endless cycle of money creation without any goods, commodities, or services being produced. In this sense, money is totally decoupled from productive economic activity, the production and sale of goods, services, as well as from life itself. And McMurtry is a huge critic of the global economy, and he's a huge critic of just simply the money code of value, where money is being used just to make more money and for no other purpose. Another example of what Aristotle's saying here is one of the quotes from an exchange by Kevin O'Leary and Amanda Lang on the Lang and O'Leary exchange on CBC. And at one point, Kevin O'Leary said, "Try a little life without cash, Amanda." And then Amanda Lang retorted, "Try cash without life, dude." So these kinds of statements are exactly what Aristotle's getting at in the passages in the handout there. The next thing that we need to talk about is the goldsmith's tale. And this is well captured. This is a theme that's well captured in the Money is Debt 1 video. And prior to modern times, the proto-banks that existed were merely well-guarded depositories of gold and silver, which reduced the risks of theft and loss from having to carry these metals around. And the goldsmiths, or the proto-bankers, they issued paper receipts for the gold and silver that was deposited with them, which symbolized or represented or substituted or stood in for the gold and silver that they held in the vault. And soon people just traded the receipts, the notes or the checks that were issued, rather than the actual gold or silver, thereby facilitating exchange, since it's so inconvenient to carry around heavy, bulky metals in lump, bar, or coin form. As well, the receipts would also prevent people from clipping or shaving state-minted gold or silver coins in their possession. However, the proto-bankers realized that they could profit by simply issuing more receipts, notes, or checks than they had gold or silver in the vault, because it was so rare that people would actually come in to take their gold and silver out of the depository. After it was realized that the proto-bankers were making a profit and only had a fraction of the gold and silver for the number of receipts or notes or checks that were issued, well, the game was up and a bank run ensued, and because there wasn't enough gold or silver to cover all the receipts, notes, or checks, only some people were able to take back possession of their wealth, resulting in an economic crisis. While the crisis led to the demise of some of the proto-bankers, in enough cases they survived by simply negotiating with depositors to keep the scheme going in exchange for a cut of the proceeds, namely in the form of depositors gaining interest on their deposits. Furthermore, since the scheme had served to expand trade in a positive and substantial way, state-sanctioned central banks were also created in order to backstop against potential bank runs, injecting money into banks when needed. Hence, paper money emerged out from the receipts, but originally it was backed at least fractionally by gold and silver. So this is the goldsmith's tale, is kind of this little vignette that points to sort of the evolution of how it is that we got to use paper money rather than pieces of gold or silver. Just to concretize some of this, when testifying in front of the U.S. Congress in 1912, prior to the development of the Federal Reserve Central Bank in 1913, financier John Pierpont Morgan once said, "Gold is money and nothing else," recognizing the risk that investors and entrepreneurs took by receiving payment in anything, any substance other than gold and silver, even if they were mere representations of them. At that time, each banknote in circulation represented 23.22 grains of pure gold, indicating that the money in use represented symbolically and derived its value from a precious metals backing, which was, each paper unit was convertible into gold. But the Federal Reserve notes that are still in use today, as you can see at the top, it doesn't say, note of the federal government. It says Federal Reserve note. So the note is issued by the Federal Reserve, which is actually the central bank, but it is really a private bank. It's not officially affiliated with the U.S. government. The Federal Reserve notes that are in use today are not backed by gold or silver, although some states like Utah have recently passed measures to recognize gold as legal tender. And when they say legal tender, it says on these bills, it says, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private," which seems to indicate that, the relationship between money and debt, that, money is this kind of social relation of debt and credit. Just moving on to talk a little bit about modern money. Well, in current times, paper and coin money is not generally backed by gold and silver. It's fiat, and this word fiat is a Latin word meaning by decree of the state, that, these little pieces of paper, you can print all sorts of fancy designs on them and put a number on them and say this is worth 1 unit of wealth. But why is that particular piece of paper worth 1 unit and this piece of paper worth 2? It seems to be very arbitrary, but that's the way we've organized our system. And there's no backing, there's no precious metals backing for these dollar bills today. There's nothing behind this except for the piece of paper it's written on. Not gold or silver anymore. But we'll get to the petrodollar just a little bit later here. They're just free-floating symbolic units of wealth or value having predetermined numerical values on them, but which are not backed by any tangible asset. While they can be offered in payment for a person's tax burden to the state, and people will accept them in terms of payment, the bills and coins themselves have little to no intrinsic worth. They're merely symbolic representations, the system of exchange depending upon the people having confidence in their value and agreeing to accept them. And today, coins are made with far less expensive metals than gold, silver, copper, and nickel. Pre-1981 nickels, they're made actually with 99.9% nickel metal, which if you got 100 of these and you had which makes up about a pound, you'd be able to sell them for about $7 for their metal content. While today's coins are shiny and reminiscent of these metals, well, they're typically made out of steel, composite alloys, and typically involve plating, as I said before. In modern economies, most fiat currency, 95% or so, or even more than that, exists neither in paper nor coin form, but in the form of electronic blips on a computer screen or in an account. And one key problem is that without being backed by any tangible asset, the issuance of fiat dollars can be expanded indefinitely by central banks. However, as nations print or expand their monetary supply in a way that is decoupled from productive economic activity, for example, more rapidly than the rate of the output of the real goods and services, the value of each unit of currency is gradually depleted and the purchasing power of each unit is decreased, which is the meaning of the word inflation. Conversely, deflation occurs when growth in the supply of money does not keep pace with the economy's current production and the purchasing power of each unit is increased. Paper, coin, and electronic money can be expanded at will and potentially irresponsibly through the printing presses or the minting of coins made with cheap metal alloys and the adding of computer blips to accounts, whereas the amount of precious metals in the world is finite in nature. There's only so much above ground gold in the world, an estimated 175,000 tons, to fill 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And there's only enough silver that, a little bit more silver, it comes out of the ground at about a 9-to-1 ratio when compared with gold. But still, it's valued at something like, 60-to-1 when it comes to the gold-silver ratio. There's an interesting infographic at a site called Demonocracy, and you can take a look at the sources I provided near the end of the handout for the link, Demonocracy. And this infographic provides you with a visual of the amount of gold that's above ground in the world today. Renowned economist Paul Krugman once said to indicate to us that irresponsibility can happen when money is simply issued through a printing press. He said, the current world monetary system assigns no special role to gold. Indeed, the Federal Reserve is not obliged to tie the dollar to anything. It can print as much or as little money as it deems appropriate. There are powerful advantages to such an unconstrained system. Above all, the Fed is free to respond to actual or threatened recessions by pumping in money. While free-floating national money has advantages, however, it also has risks. For one thing, it can create uncertainties for international traders and investors because of the volatility in terms of the value or worth of the dollar. Furthermore, a system that leaves monetary managers free to do good also leaves them free to be irresponsible, and in some countries they've been quick to take the opportunity. For example, in Zimbabwe, where they printed literally to infinity, people were carrying around trillion-dollar notes and had to bring a whole stack of trillion-dollar notes into a store on a wheelbarrow in order to be able to purchase a loaf of bread. It suffices to say that no unbacked fiat system in history has proven sustainable. All have come to an end at some point, and it's conceivable that the current monetary system may also need to be reset at some point. Many of these systems just simply end in a printing press orgy, resets to monetary systems are a usual part of human existence. We just may not recognize this because we haven't experienced one in our lifetimes. Today, as part of the stimulus measures following from the 2007-2008 financial crisis and the resulting downturn in the economy, we might ask whether we're truly in a recovery here. In any case, the Federal Reserve in the United States has been printing $85 billion a month buying treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities, which has had the effect of suppressing interest rates in order to stimulate the economy. The present phase of stimulus is known as quantitative easing 3, and since 2009, the Federal Reserve has at least doubled the money supply. Our finance minister, Jim Flaherty, recently questioned the continued money printing in the United States and suggested that it will lead to potential dangers like hyperinflation. One would expect that this move would have caused extreme inflation or hyperinflation. Hyperinflation, this is inflation that's getting out of hand. That's runaway inflation. One would have expected this would have happened by now, and would have decreased the purchasing power of each unit of currency due to the large increase in the money supply and the dilution of value in every dollar. On the surface, it appears that this has not yet happened, presumably because the velocity of money, meaning the rate at which dollars change hands, is still being held in check. Banks are still sitting on the cash injections that the Federal Reserve has provided them with, rather than loaning this money out. And if they were loaned out, the money supply might be multiplied exponentially because of fractional reserve banking. And there's a section on fractional reserve banking a little bit below. Critics of the stimulus measures speculate that recent changes to the way that the government calculates inflation statistics have the intention of masking real inflation. And there's a website called shadowstats.com which intends to provide more accurate GDP, inflation, and other economic data than government sources. So there are people who disagree with the way that these things have been calculated by the government. Critics also hold that consumers have noticed a decrease in purchasing power and an increase in the price of living, and that there's a stealth inflation going on, meaning, for example, that while prices for many packaged items have not gone up, net volumes of the products have been shrunk, and or goods are now being made with cheaper, lower quality ingredients. Meanwhile, the U.S. has a national debt that has grown to over $17 trillion, in addition to its unfunded liabilities that are estimated to total another $70 trillion. Partly in order to fund the wars against communism in Vietnam and elsewhere, and partly to avoid foreign holders of American currency cashing it in for gold, in 1971, President Nixon took America off the gold standard. And this signaled the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement that had been in place since the end of World War II, under which American money was backed by gold. While the Constitution of the United States suggests that the only legal tender is money backed by gold and silver coins, Nixon said that this move to take America off the gold standard was a temporary measure, although the United States has not since returned to the gold standard. In its place was a 1973 deal with the Saudis to sell oil only in American dollars. Also known as the petrodollar agreement, the deal requires all oil-producing and exporting nations of the world to sell their petroleum, a commodity all nations need, in American dollars only, in exchange for the protection of the U.S. military. This agreement is a major reason why the American dollar is still the world's reserve currency today. While requiring other nations to hold U.S. dollar reserves in order to be able to buy oil, in turn these dollars could no longer be redeemed in American gold. Furthermore, their value could be diminished by way of inflation and the expansion of the money supply by the Federal Reserve. The United States has consistently placed sanctions on nations attempting to deviate from this agreement, nations that are trying to sell oil in other currencies. The Americans have sought regime change when people are trying to do this, and these nations that are trying to do this have had to face the might of the American military. And just to give you a little bit of more explanation about the petrodollar, I'm going to read you something from a website called www.kcresearch.com, which explains a little bit more about the petrodollar. It says, in 1973, President Nixon asked King Faisal of Saudi Arabia to accept only US dollars as payment for oil and to invest any excess profits in US Treasury bonds, notes, and bills. In exchange, Nixon pledged to protect Saudi Arabian oil fields from the Soviet Union and other interested nations, such as Iran and Iraq. It was the start of something great for the U.S., even if the outcome was as artificial as U.S. real estate bubble and yet constitutes the foundation for the valuation of the U.S. dollar. By 1975, all of the members of OPEC agreed to sell their oil only in U.S. dollars. Every oil importing nation of the world started saving their surplus in US dollars so as to be able to buy oil. With such high demand for dollars, the currency strengthened. On top of that, many oil exporting nations like Saudi Arabia spent their US dollar surpluses on treasury securities, providing a new deep pool of lenders to support US government spending. The petrodollar system was a brilliant political and economic move. It forced the world's oil money to flow through the US Federal Reserve, creating ever-growing international demand for both US dollars and US debt, while essentially letting the US pretty much own the world's oil for free, since oil's value is denominated in a currency that America controls and prints. The petrodollar system spread beyond oil. The majority of international trade is done in US dollars. That means that from Russia to China, Brazil to South Korea, every country aims to maximize the US dollar surplus garnered from its export trade to buy oil. And the U.S. has reaped many rewards. As oil usage increased in the 1980s, demand for the U.S. dollar rose with it, lifting the U.S. economy to new heights. But even without the economic success at home, the U.S. dollar would have soared because the petrodollar system created consistent international demand for U.S. dollars, which in turn gained in value. A strong U.S. dollar allowed Americans to buy imported goods at a massive discount. The petrodollar system essentially created a subsidy for U.S. consumers at the expense of the rest of the world. But there's a potential threat now lurking in the shadows, this article suggests. The value of the U.S. dollar is determined in large part by the fact that oil is sold in U.S. dollars. If that trade shifts to a different currency, countries around the world won't need all their U.S. money, and the resulting sell-off of U.S. dollars would weaken the currency dramatically. So here's an interesting thought experiment. This article says, everybody says that the U.S. goes to war to protect its oil supplies, but doesn't it really go to war to ensure continuation of the petrodollar system? The Iraq War provides a good example. Until November 2000, no OPEC country had dared to violate the U.S. dollar pricing rule, and while the US dollar remained the strongest currency in the world, there was also little reason to challenge the system. But in late 2000, France and a few other EU members convinced Saddam Hussein to defy the petrodollar process and to sell Iraq's oil for food in euros, not in dollars. This points to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, one of the reasons for why the U.S. invaded Iraq. Simply because it was intending to sell its oil in other currencies. We might ask, whether the maintenance of the petrodollar is one of the chief reasons why the United States has placed sanctions on, has sought regime changes in, and has gone to war with so many Middle Eastern nations in past years, like Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Egypt, regime change in Egypt. Syria, where there was almost war last month, and Iran. Is there going to be a potential war a little bit later? certainly they've placed tremendous sanctions on Iran, economic sanctions. Some nations, such as China and Russia, are today starting to chisel away at the petrodollar. They're negotiating bilateral trade deals to circumvent the US dollar. They're accumulating gold at a rapid rate, perhaps to try to surpass the United States' reported 8,100 tons of gold, and they may be aiming to topple the American dollar from the status of world reserve currency, perhaps ultimately by backing their currencies with gold or with a basket of commodities. Also, recent tensions between Saudi Arabia and the United States over a military intervention in Syria may be signaling that the petrodollar arrangement is nearing its end. And we've just seen, for example, John Kerry going to Saudi Arabia in order to try to make amends, in order to try to patch things up with the Saudis. Well, I guess that's enough for tonight. I'll see you guys on Wednesday, and we'll take it from there. But if you haven't done so already, please watch the video Money is Debt 1. Also, feel free to explore some of the sources that I've provided at the end of this handout. All right, have a great one, and we'll see you back in class on Wednesday. Take care. Bye.